Hi guys, this episode of Decklog Breakdown was filmed live in front of a studio audience. Viewer discretion is advised. Our Beast of Prey had asked us to break down a little bit and talk about Zorga, because they love the archetype a whole lot too as well. You know, they like themselves some red and blue. I believe that Zorga's in a very weird situation where both versions are actually viable options, and both of them actually do pretty well in tournaments at a local level. I have not tried them at any of the Springfest tournaments yet. They have done pretty well at Springfests too. So, you know, give it a try yourself and see if you do happen to like it. I like this archetype as well. So let's break this archetype down and answer some of the questions that they had for us, and we can give you some feedback as to some changes you might want to make in the future, especially when we get some new support that's rolling around on set 6 and set 7 respectively. So let's take a look. So first, we do have our staple cards. I'm not going to really spend too much time talking about them. I'll talk about like the tech options that I'm currently running right now, which is the one of Sleeve Tugging Bell at the moment, and the one copy of Overcoming Unnatural Death. I'm running draws in my version of this list, and I'm going to put in this deck profile in the comment section below or in the description of this video so you can kind of see it for yourself. I'm playing draws in this list since we are running an order that we got recently in the previous set here. In a special series set, the same set with Orpheus, we have gotten the Clouded Miasma. Clouded Miasma gives 5k to your front row by paying the cost of Counterblast and fusing it with an older card of Grief, Despair, Rejection, giving 10k to 3 of your units. You can possibly put 15k to your front row, which is pretty scary for your opponent to deal with. If you put it on a Roman Prison Dragon that gets plus 10 from himself, it's an extra plus 20 odd k power. It's 25k base on its own already, plus critical, which is kind of insane, plus a booster in the back. Dude, come on. It's really insane, right? And I really like that you have that sort of play without having to be on Persona Ride all the time. We are still running 4 copies of Zorga, original ones, because we still want to get to our Persona turns, because your hand tends to be pretty relatively chunky. We are also running Headhunters in our list. I think almost all Zorga versions do play Headhunter still. I would probably say in Red Zorga you might not really need this that much because you use Soul over Counterblast, which you do happen to run more copies of Tearful Malice for. Some iterations I've seen run 2 to 3 copies of this card, and maybe no copies of Nectar, but there are moments where you don't have both Prison Dragons on board, or there's not a real way to get the Prison Dragons on board. You could target the Shadow Cloak with Nectar, give it a bit of extra power, and you call yourself one of your dragons. It's kind of one of the very awkward situations where you can't get any, and of course we're still playing 4 Shadow Cloaks. We're playing most of the stable cards, 4 of. With Hendrina, you don't really need it, no. You don't really need it. I would see Hendrina in Red Zorga, because Red Zorga, again, tends to go out of soul sometimes, and some of the new orders I'm going to be sure you guys do need a bit of soul every now and again. So yeah, you don't really need the mill. Most Zorga lists do not need the mill anymore. So right now I'm actually answering the chat in our chat box right now on twitch.tv/JJRogers. If you're keen to take a look, you can hop on over. We could play some Vanguard together, talk about Vanguard. It's really awesome. But if you want to run Hendrina yourself, Hendrina is okay-ish, I guess, but you don't really need it. Yeah, so you don't really need Hendrina. Hendrina is usually only for like spiritual body, I guess. That's kind of it. You're minusing yourself. You're minusing yourself by removing one of your rear guards off the board to call it back, I guess, which is kind of okay. And you could keep on trying to mill, but during the progression of the game, a lot of the decks going first are really aggressive nowadays, and you're gonna get to the 15 cards and drop eventually. You'll get to a lot of cards and drop by process of actually guarding and attacking and drawing and dropping and plussing and all that stuff. So the deck itself kind of scales really, really well as long as you keep you keep on your toes and pay attention to how you revolve your orders, or and it's in a revolving circle. What you target usually on my first Shadow Cloak call, if I happen to have 2 orders in my hand, I tend to target the overcoming unnatural death. I tend to target a lot of my 1-ofs and send those to the drop zone, because there are a lot of the times like I kind of really need those, you know, to be there. So when I drive into my drive checks, I hit more triggers and stuff like that. And if you're trying to hit your remaining prison dragons, is also relatively important. If you happen to draw into them, you could feed them to PGs. You could use your Shadow Cloak. You could use your Zorga to call your PGs. Use Shadow Cloak to bounce it back, especially if you end up resolving a overcoming a natural death or elixir plus a miasma. You have a lot of different options to get reach in this deck, which is something Red Zorga can do with multiple drive checks, extra drive checks, especially with using the Gather Up Ye Wandering Souls. Actually, I'll show it to you guys. It's the yeah, I need to remove this. And I need to remove that. Look at this. Here we go. Need to remove this. So Gather Up allows you to discard an order to play this from your hand, and your Vanguard gets an extra drive check, which in some instances it's really nice, because you don't have to care about your orders anymore. You can kind of play the dream of like 1 order, you know. You can always have your Alchemagic go off, always do the same thing every single turn, by always being able to get extra drive checks, but you could run the risk of decking out, especially if you're running draws. So some lists end up playing fronts instead, because it keeps you from decking out and stuff. But in my list, or my iteration of the deck, since we're not playing that order, we want to hit our orders, and we want to try to preserve our hand and preserve the orders. We just want to try to loop our PGs back into our hand, and want to try to build a hand to do so. And then for the heal triggers, I actually also wanted to talk about that a little bit at length. This deck, Zorga, is in a very interesting situation, in a very interesting position, that it can actually call these heal triggers, depending on the matchups, from your drop zone that you used earlier in the game, and you can bounce them back into your hand to get extra plus 15k shield using on your opponent's offensive turn. Because then you can be like, oh well, I'm against a matchup that gets a whole bunch of crits on the rear guard. Alright, that's sick. I'll get the Alchemagic Hedgehog. Or you can go and get the Fairy Asher, and you can just get it back to your hand, which is really good. Alright, that's kind of it. It's Overdress, right? And then we also have our tech card, you know, Sleeve Tugging Bell, which when it's placed, you can choose all of your remove from play or banished orders, and you can send it back in the drop zone. And for every copy, it gets +5, and it combos very well with overcoming unnatural death, because of the additional effect of using the orders, since it's sharing the same skill as the order you're using for Alchemagic, is that both of them get removed from play, and with Bell it sends them to the drop zone, and you get to add 2 back orders to your hand, which you can then use later on in the game, so you get to keep on the cycle going, right? And then Zorga can call back Bell later, and you can use it for Tear from Malice, Bell, and Dragon for Tear from Malice, and you just keep on looping. You just keep on playing the game. You have a way of a self-sufficient engine. I've seen some people probably play 2 to 3 copies of Bell and maybe like 2 to 3 copies of Malice, because they just want to keep that loop going. But that's entirely up to you. And now for the tech options. These are going to be some of the ways you can navigate your deck into the early game. These are some of the tech options that JP has used before, at least one of the tech options that JP has used before. The other 2 cards that I'll be mentioning are the cards I'll be getting in the future, and those are the ones you want to probably reintroduce into your deck. Maybe get rid of the Tugging Bell plus the Overcoming. I like them because those are my 2 cards, my 2 favorite cards in Archetype. I like being able to recycle my utility a whole lot, especially when I know I can't kill my opponent immediately. And Zorga's a very slow deck, very slow, and your opponent tends to almost always have PGs, so you always want to be a step ahead of your opponent. In search of an ideal far away, choose one of your units until end of turn auto. When your other units attacks, it gets plus 5k until end of turn. You can have a moment where you, for your grade 1, discarded a roaming prison dragon, right? And then your grade 2, you discarded a roaming prison dragon. And then you use ideals far away, and then you target your Vanguard, or you target like one of the other rear guards or something, right? That you committed to the board. You target one of those units, you call your Roman Prison Dragon, give 1 plus 5, and the other one in the other column with a booster plus a crit. So then you have the idea far away targeting that, you attack it with 2 cards, that column gets plus 10, so it makes it that your opponent has to guard with 15k shield, or 15 to 20k shield on your first grade 2 turn. And since the grade 1 order, it can be kind of nutty. It can get really wild. I've seen some people play this card to some really good effect in Zorga. You could try it yourselves. I've seen people run 1, none. It's entirely up to you. Alright. Then we have in Dim Darkness, the Frozen Resentment. So you play this by Soul Blasting 1. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Choose up to 1 card from among them. Discard a card. Discard that card and shuffle your deck. Choose a card from your drop zone with grade less or equal to your Vanguard and call it to Rearguard Circle. It's a grade 1 order. It's coming out in set 6, right around the corner. I think next week, quite literally. In a week or so. Quite literally, a week or 2. And it is a really good card. It allows you to send a roaming prison dragon to the drop. You soul blast maybe a grade 2 or something. You call the grade 2. Sadly enough, the roaming prison dragon won't call itself because it was sent as a part of the skill and not the cost, which doesn't work. You'll miss the timing for calling the card, but at least you could set up the next turn with it. So that's still pretty good. It's still really nice. Then we have the Sweetness is a Bad Dream, one of the alternate options that you can play for set 6. Also comes out in set 6. Play this card by Counterblast 1. Draw a card, look at the top of your deck, put it on the top of your deck, or you can discard it. That's kind of nutty because you can look at your top and you can see, oh, that's an overtrigger. I'm gonna just keep that to the top of the deck. Thank you. And it gives you a draw. That's so good. That's so good. So you can use these options. So you can use these options to play instead of running maybe Spiritual Condensations, maybe Nectars. Like I would still probably run at least 2 copies of Griffith's Rejection, so you can maybe run 2 on 2, right? And then maybe like 1 on 1 of each of these, or like 2 on 1, because I could see this replacing Spiritual Body, right? This set up so well, right? This gives you so much extra reach because you can send anything to the drop zone. You can send any extra orders to the drop zone. You can send a bell to the drop zone. It feeds so well into your archetype and what you're doing. It's so good. But yeah, I like this card a whole lot. I am singing high praises to this card. And it's a double rare, right? It's a double rare from the set, and I think this one's the common from the set. It's also really good. Even for it costing a Counterblast, it draws you a card and gives you some selection that you wanted. You know, you can look at the top. Oh, that's an order. Drop zone. You know? It's so good. But yeah, let's see. Beast of Prey asks, what about the Fine Drink of Admonishment of Sin, the Blitz order for Soul Blast? That's entirely up to you. You can run that if you want to. But then I would recommend playing the Grade 3 that gets your Blitz orders back. Maybe as a one-of. It seems kind of int, right? It seems pretty int, but there's a Grade 3 that gets your Blitz orders back. But then I think Red Zorga gives you back any order, right? So you can always just like... And you also have... you have also Overcoming Unnatural Death that also gives you back an order too. Your orders back as well. And it gives you back any of your orders back. So you can also get back your Blitz order too. So that's entirely up to you. Alright, you can get back any of your orders back to your hand. No. Normal order actually. Oh, that's unfortunate. So it's the one that gets your Blitz orders back, which is the Chef. But then you need to build like a whole concept around this, and this is a very dicey. You can recycle with overcoming though, right? Yeah, you can recycle with overcoming, or you can recycle with this. That's entirely up to you. Are the any first set orders still played in Zorga? I guess Tearful Malice. I think Tearful Malice over all versions of Zorga are still played. I think no matter what version of Zorga, this is still ran, only due to the fact that it clears your Roman Prison Dragons for you. There's an other option of clearing your Roman Prison Dragons. There's other options as well. Maybe some of the the Roa support, the Momoke token. The Momoke token can retire your rear guards and gain power for every card that it retires. And it could be played in Red Zorga because there's oftentimes, since you're not using much CB, it gives you a mana sink. And I see some lists tend to mix it with some of the token support, which also mixes with Tearful Malice, which allows you to draw a card and recycle and countercharge and added bonuses and pressure and stuff. I like that idea that you kind of have a little bit of things to do every turn, but I'm a very lazy person. I just want to activate my order, call my dragons out, and attack sideways. I don't like these 8-layer, 64 pentagram, octagonal, mechanics, just looking up string theory and quantum Pythagorean. I just kind of want to turn my dragon sideways and force my opponent to guard it. That's kind of... what about Wild Intelligence? I think it's a little too slow and you waste a Counterblast to mill 3. What is different between Sweetness is a Bad Dream? It is a grade 1 that you can use on your going second turn if you're not using Ideal Search Away, and especially in a situation where you probably have some dragons in your drop zone, or you could use it Dimming the Darkness of Frozen Resentment to also have that similar effect. So this is more or less a selected Wild Intelligence that splices into a Spiritual Body Condensation, which is by far, I think, a lot better than Wild Intelligence right now. Yeah, so Frozen Resentment does not cost a Counterblast, and we want to try, if we're playing the blue version of Zorga, we do not want to use a lot of our Counterblasts, right? If we're playing Red Zorga, Wild Intelligence I can see probably played, because you're not really using any CB anyway, and plus you have Headhunter, so it doesn't really matter, right? You can kind of like, you can kind of shrug on it. Doesn't matter, really. You could even commit the Headhunter early, and, yeah, it depends on what version. So you need to basically think, if something costs a lot of Soul Blast, then you probably don't really want to play it in, Red Zorga unless you have a way to facilitate it, and things that cost a lot of Counterblast, you don't really want to play it in Blue Zorga unless you have things to facilitate it, like Headhunters, early Headhunters, and Mulligan for them. It creates a lot of cool and interesting ways of, like, both of them can kind of be doing the same thing, but both of them do them at very different paces. Right, both of them do them at very different paces. So it's one of the cool things. How you get to your roaming prison dragon and how I get to mine by either playing blue or red, it's entirely up to you. And that's kind of the coolest adventure for it. And then with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, for our YouTube channel, this has been your boy JJ. Be awesome, stay awesome. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in and stopping on by. For the people on YouTube, do not on Twitch, Jesus. The people on Twitch, do not go anywhere. We'll be right back.